Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and in this video, I'm going to be asking whether the children of illegal immigrants ought to be separated from their parents. It's a hotly disputed topic because of what's going on in the United States. A few months ago, the Trump administration initiated this new policy. Notably, it's not a law, despite Trump's spokespeople mendaciously claiming that it is a law. It's a policy that could be changed by presidential fiat. So, illegal immigration is against the criminal law. Therefore, anyone who does this is a criminal. However, lots of people are criminals. It's by no means a heinous crime, quite a trifling one. And we don't prosecute everything. Quite often we let things drift. So I don't want to brand people too badly, saying they're criminals. If someone's committed a crime once, they shouldn't be considered a criminal for the rest of their life. But someone could be prosecuted for a breach of the criminal law. And if we're going to have any immigration policy at all, there has to be laws about it. And those who break the law, well, they have to be dealt with, which could be simply saying, well, you're going to have to leave now, or could be prosecuting them, sending them to prison for a while. Now, sending someone to prison for coming in illegally is somewhat self-defeating, because rather than booting them out, you're keeping them there for a few months or even years at public expense. But the trouble is, if you don't do something like this, well, then you send them back, and they may as well come back the very next day, because there's no loss to them. So I know some people shriek about, oh, we're all human, we're allowed to go everywhere, but come on, I don't know of anyone who advocates totally open borders. If we'd have any immigration policy at all, there have to be a few restrictions, some checks. People who want to come and work in a different country usually have to apply, get a work permit, unless it's in the European Union where there's free movement to people. Now, I realise this can be a Kafkaesque runaround. I wouldn't like the whirligig of having to get these visas. And it is too bureaucratic and too lengthy and so on, especially going to the United States. I've known people who are married to US citizens, and it's a nightmare for them. What a rigmarole of having to submit blood tests, and it can't be to just any old hospital, it has to be this particular hospital, and piles of documents, people wanting to study there. Anyway, so people illegally immigrate because they want a better quality of life, better money, higher salaries and so on. Sometimes they're claiming asylum, claiming they have a well-founded fear of persecution in their home country. Doesn't have to be being killed or even violence, but at least persecution. Don't have to prove that they actually have been persecuted or discriminated against, just that they have a well-founded fear of it. It can't be a trifling fear. Anyone can have a fleeting fear, a very unfounded fear of persecution in any country or discrimination. That's not sufficient. It has to be reasonably convincing. So some people who come illegally claim asylum, others do not. Well, why didn't you come through the legal channels? All right, you could have tried to come as a tourist or get a work permit or as a student, but that's more expensive, more time consuming. They may well have been rejected for a student visa, rejected for a tourist visa. They may not have the money to do that. And work permit, well, as I say, that's very difficult indeed. What a headache. So they choose to cross the border illegally. And the children were separated from the parents. Why? Well, partly because the parents are being prosecuted, so they're charged with the crime, they're remanded in custody, awaiting trial, and during the trial. And of course, we don't send children to prison. Now, there are some countries like Thailand or Bolivia in recent times where children have gone into prison with their parents. They don't have to, but often it's felt that they're better looked after, and it's better for them, and it improves the atmosphere in the prison. Or even in the United Kingdom, mothers of babies under 6 months, well, especially if they're pregnant when they're sent to prison, they can give birth and keep their child with them for the first few months in a special maternity unit in the prison. But that's very exceptional. It's very unusual. What you're going to do, separate the baby as soon as he or she is born. They need to be breastfed and all that. Anyway, so in some ways, well, it's right to separate the children from their parents. Is it? Does anyone actually advocate sending these children to prison with their parents? We're not holding the children criminally responsible for this. Bear in mind, these so-called children could be 17, so virtual adults. So the children are somewhat looked after in the custody of the United States government. They're fed, housed, and provided with medical care. I have seen some images, and often the care seems to be decidedly second-rate. So that's another issue. They ought to be treated humanely, and I don't mean simply kept alive. A bit more than that. On the other hand, it doesn't need to be opulent. So the parents in the criminal justice system, well, whose fault is it that they're in the criminal justice system? to a large extent, the parents themselves. They chose to come illegally. They didn't have to do it. Could have not moved at all. Could have moved somewhere else. Could have come the legal route. No, that's not always a viable option, the legal route. And they know this is the policy, so don't do it. And they put their children at great risk. They're usually crossing the desert from the Mexican border, not coming by road. They could have died of exposure, of heat stroke, and been murdered by these criminal people traffickers and all the rest of it. So they're not terribly responsible parents who do that, but maybe they face such dire penury at home, it seems to be better than staying put. However bad it is, crossing the desert on foot, perhaps that's a more alluring option than living in absolute poverty in whichever country it is. This idea that they really need to claim asylum is largely bogus, because I don't think anyone's persecuted in Mexico. There's not severe discrimination, so far as I know. There is a drug war, that's true, but that's the different issue. A crime wave, I don't think that's considered sufficient reason to claim asylum. So the United States could deport people, as it previously did, or say, okay, you're claiming asylum, we'll process the asylum claim, forget about criminal prosecution, and say, but if you agree to go home, you can be reunited with your children today, but you have to leave with them. Anyway, but so much for family values. The Republican Party saying we always want families to stay together, we don't want parents to divorce and so on, and parents have an absolute right to control their children, include beat them, not send them to school, not give them any sex education, things like that, brainwash them into whichever deranged religious mania they like. Now, in Trump's defense, I must say this is more or less what people voted for. I know it's a minority, actually. Zero tolerance on immigration. So this tough, or perhaps I should say savage, policy on illegal immigration is what people thought they were getting, those who voted for them, and they got what they signed up for. So this is one of the rare occasions in which he has honoured his promise. I don't think he advocated this specific policy, but the tone was there. I heard about these children crying because they're separated again from their parents. Is that any basis for a policy, whether a child cries or not? Children cry about all sorts of things. Should we give them whatever toys they want? Not make them do homework? Not make them eat vegetables? Things like that. This is preposterous. This is wild emotionalism. So I don't think we should be blackmailed by that. I mean, if we say we mustn't have children cry, we'd have no war. Well, that would be a positive thing. But I don't think many people watching would say, well, we'd never, ever fight under any circumstances. We'd have no poverty. Well, we do absolutely everything to make sure children are never in poverty. Well, we could do a lot more, but I think those watching don't do everything they possibly could, wouldn't advocate all policies to obliterate poverty, like taking away the wealth of anyone who's even reasonably well off. We could have no walls. And some of the alternatives are saying, well, Trump is saying, why don't you fund my border wall and then I'll change this policy. So he is using these children as bargaining chips. He is causing them to suffer, thinking that the Democrats have a breaking point. They find what's happening to these children unconscionable, and they would do anything, including funding that moronic wall, in order to get these children released. But how bad is it to be separated from your parents? Well, I should know. I went to boarding school when I was 7, and there were no phone calls except on our birthday. These children have daily teleconferences. Well, actually, I'm not sure it's daily. I know it was a different era, and phone calls were much more expensive back then. I was told I should feel privileged, and I certainly cried about that. I was in a dormitory of 12 children. Now, I can't say that I lived in poverty. We had all the basics of life and a few treats, and I was, in some respects, a fortunate child. So, but I think the harshness of this policy is sometimes overplayed, and it's the parents who put them in the situation in the first instance. I have to ask, is this policy fair? And that's arguable. I don't think it's terribly unfair. Is it proportionate? Well, it's never been done before. It's unprecedented. I'm not sure if it's disproportionate. Might be. Is it wise? Possibly not. I don't know of any other country which does this as standard, so perhaps it reflects discredit on the United States. It's tarnishing the reputation of the United States, where compassionate conservatism, that used to be the Republican slogan, and I see no compassion here. They think compassion is limp-wristed. So anyone who says we should show mercy is a wimp, as Trump would say. This is tough, which is what would really be tough is having the moral courage to say, oh, I made a mistake, this is wrong, and to go against it. Well, it takes a bit of moral courage to be execrated, made a pariah for advocating for Trump's policy here. So this may well be seen to bring the United States into disrepute. Will it reduce illegal immigration? I expect it will, because it seems to be deeply unattractive. And people who have spent several months in prison are going to go home, not have money to try again, and not want to go through that again. So the word will get out of this very hardline policy. And that was Trump's aim. Now, the United States faces many severe problems, such as mass shootings, such as the lack of affordable health care, these ongoing conflicts in Iraq, Iran, and on and on and on. I think illegal immigration from Mexico is not high on the priority list. It wouldn't be for me. I know for many Americans it is. But there we are. So of all Trump's policies, I think this is his worst. It's certainly tendentious. I have mixed feelings about it. I don't think it's delightful. It's not intended to be. But I don't think it's that dreadful after all.